All right. Today we're talking about Alexander the G. Alexander the Great, and a funny story from one of his campaigns. So I'm going to be talking about one specific story from one of Alexander's campaigns, and this particular campaign was called the Malian campaign. So, for people not familiar with Alexander the Great, he was a conqueror that was from Macedonia that conquered all of the Persian Empire and a small portion of India. And he had been on a 10-year campaign, and his men didn't want to go any further after they reached India because they fought a guy named King Porus. All right. And King Porus had a shit ton of elephants. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't really want to go fight against a giant elephant with a spear. So, you know, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. But so they decide they're going to go back home. But they're not just going to go back home and just, go the nice, peaceful, scenic route. No, this is Alexander we're talking about. So there's got to be some glitz and glare. So he decides, all right, we're going to fuck up some tribes on the way home then. We're going to conquer a bunch of people we didn't conquer on the way back. And this leads us to him in this Malian campaign. So, Mali is located right near the border of India in this time period. And Alexander and his army roll up on these dudes, and they don't want any smoke. So, they roll back inside their nice high walls, and they're like, all right, man, come get us. So, Alexander's like, all right, man, fuck it, we're going to besiege the city. So, he gets his army ready, and they get all their siege equipment ready, and they're going up towards the city. And Alexander's getting pissed off because these fucking guys are taking forever to get the siege equipment set up. I don't think they didn't have siege towers, if I understand correctly, because this was a small city. It wasn't like they were besieging a huge castle or anything. But they did have scaling ladders. So his guys are taking forever to get the scaling ladders up, and Alexander's getting fucking pissed off. He's like, "Come on, we gotta conquer these people. Let's go." So we don't have all day. And so they finally get the scaling ladders up to the front, and Alexander at this time is in the front of his army. He liked to fight, in the front lines with all of his men. And he decides he's going to grab the first scaling ladder that gets there. So the first ladder gets up to the front line, and he grabs it. He puts it up against the wall, and he climbs up that bitch. And he gets up to the wall, and he fucks some people up. Cuts down some defenders. And all of a sudden, arrows just start whizzing past him. And all the archers, on the fucking wall are shooting at him. And you have to understand, Alexander was very, very easy to pick out of his Macedonian army because he had like the most ornate armor of anyone in the army. He had a lion's helmet. It was a metal helmet that resembled a lion. He had this breastplate that was super unique. I think it had like some sort of Medusa head on the front, I think. Super ornate. And he had like red feathers sticking out of his helmet. And he had a shield, the Shield of Troy, which was like this super ceremonial, like awesome looking shield. And so what I'm trying to say is he's easy to pick out of the army. You know what I'm saying? He's not blending in with the army. So he's on this wall and arrows are whizzing past him, and he faces a decision. He's like, what should I do here? And his men are crying for him to jump back down because they're like, oh shit, like our king is on the wall alone getting shot at with arrows. And so they start begging him like, jump down please, and they're pleading with him. And he has another option, which is go into the city. And so, he actually climbs down the ladder and he goes back to his men. And no, I'm just kidding. No, this is Alexander. Fuck all that bullshit. So he jumps into the enemy city alone. And thankfully, two of his bodyguards make it up that ladder that he went up on, and they jump in so they can be with him. But after that, the army tries to get in the city all at once. So they're all trying to climb the ladders at one time. And what ends up happening is they break the ladders because there's too many of them trying to climb at one time, and they fucking break, all the ladders break. So Alexander jumps in the city alone and he just starts fucking people up, right? And it's like, they say a little bit after his guys jump in and they help him. And you have to understand, it sounds fictitious, right? You hear this guy jumps into a city alone and he starts battling people. You're like, you know what? This is not an action movie. This didn't happen. But you have to understand, this guy had the best training since he was a young, since he was a boy. He was trained in fighting from the time he was a kid by probably the best teachers you can get. And he also had really good fucking equipment. He had I believe it was bronze. I don't know. I don't know all the different, I don't know what material his armor was made out of, but he had a metal helmet. He had metal greaves, my bad. He had metal arm protectors. He had really good armor, right? He had this chest plate that was made out of, like, I don't remember the name of it, but it's a certain type of chest plate, and it's made out of leather strips that you glue together, and it makes like this fucking ancient Kevlar. It's like really strong. And the guys they're going against are not well equipped. I mean, it doesn't say what their armor is, but we can kind of guess based on what we know about tribes in that region and what the Persians had, and they probably didn't have any armor on, and if they did, it was a real light wicker kind of. They might have like a light wicker shield and maybe some, some sort of kind of thick cloth or woven type of shit to try to protect them. It probably wouldn't do it. Like, it really doesn't help. They had a wicker shield, which, could stop arrows, but what I'm trying to say is it's a massive mismatch. I mean, like, it's not that unbelievable that this guy could, like, fuck up, a lot of these guys who are defending the city, because, I mean, they're outclassed. I mean, way better armor, way better equipment, way better training. So, anyways, back to the story. So, they're in the city and they're fucking people up, Alexander and his two buddies, and eventually, like, a lot of these Indian dudes start, or Malian, my bad, Malian guys start forming like a semicircle around him. And at first they were afraid of him. When he first jumps in the city, they're terrified because they see this guy who was like, or in the ancient world, he was known as the son of Zeus. Like, literally, they thought he descended from Zeus. So they were terrified. But they gain some numbers. They surround him. They start throwing rocks at him. They start fucking, doing charges at him. And he's like, what the fuck? I'm assuming he was. It didn't say directly in the text, but he's like, what the fuck? I'm sitting here, like, with my two homies, and, like, where are my men? And one of his homies gets shot in the face with an arrow, goes down. He's done. So it's just him and his one other friend now. And an arrow flies through the air and punctures his body armor. And he falls to the ground, and the arrow punctured his lung. And he gets back up and he starts fighting again because there are all these dudes that are trying to kill him. There's like, there's probably like 10, 20 guys around him, like, all trying to fucking kill him. And so they say he fights for as long as he can until he loses consciousness. He loses consciousness from blood loss. And his one homie is, like, just covering him up with a shield, like, doing his best to, like, shield him from arrows and trying to fight these guys off, but he's fucked, like, they're gonna get him within the next minute. Maybe sooner, maybe 30 seconds. So finally, Alexander's army gets in. And they got in by burrowing. Like, they got shovels, and, like, some guys use their fucking hands. And they start fucking, they burrow underneath the city wall. And some of them stack, like, eight people on top of each other's shoulders, and they, like, get in that way. So they finally start trickling in, and they see their king, in a pool of blood. So they get him out of there, and he gets surgery done, and he's all good. He ends up being fine. He just, he almost died, though. And his men just fucking decimate the city. They're just like, fuck you guys. So they just slaughter everyone in the city. And the reason this story is awesome and also humorous is because who does that? You know what I mean? Like, no one in their right mind would jump into an enemy city alone where there are hundreds of guys waiting to fucking kill you. Nobody. But this guy, you have to understand, he was told by one of the best oracles in the ancient world that he was the son of Zeus. And, you know, in modern times, we hear that and we go, oh, that's what no one would ever, you know, we don't really understand it. But back then, they literally believed that that was his real dad. And you can imagine what kind of, you know, bravado and confidence you would have if you thought Zeus was your fucking dad. Probably would be, you know, you wouldn't be afraid to fucking jump into an enemy city alone. But it's so funny to me because the reasoning he gave for doing it was, he said, if I got shot with an arrow on the wall and I died, I would have died accomplishing nothing. At least by jumping into the enemy city, I could strike fear into their hearts. And to me, it's just such a funny concept that he says he would have died on the wall accomplishing nothing when he already had built one of the most impressive empires ever seen in history. So goes to show you his fucking goddamn. If you think you're a high achiever, this guy is on a whole nother fucking level. But all right, this was a short story in history by a Zoomer. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and more coming on the way.